Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Okay, we left off last week with Jacob making the decision to leave his father-in-law Laban with his two wives and all his children. So, yeah. We'll turn to Genesis. Chapter 31. And we'll just go to verse 17. It says, Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all of his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods that he had accumulated in Paddan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, he had gone out to do work, Rachel stole her father's household gods. So that tells you right there that Laban had these idols. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him that he was running away. And later we will read Joseph's reasoning for doing that. So he fled with all that he had, and he crossed the Euphrates River, and he headed for the hill country of Gilead. On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. 3 days. Taking his relatives with him, so a large party, he pursued Jacob for 7 days. But he caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Now at that time, Then God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." So in other words, he was saying, be discreet, have discretion, be careful. Now, God waited until Laban had caught up with Jacob. And we will read later on why God intervened, because he had to. But the most important part was God was watching both parties. He was watching. And the night before Laban was going to go to Jacob, I believe, and the wording ahead of us here will show, he was going to go to Jacob aggressively. And God had to intervene and warn him, be careful. So in verse 25, Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him and caught up to him. And Laban and his relatives camped there too. Right? And then I guess God had visited Laban that night. Then Laban said to Jacob, he was the first one to speak, "What have you done? You deceived me, and you've carried off my daughters like captives in war." That's how Laban viewed this. And you know that by what he said. You basically Laban still viewed them as his. Not Jacob's wives, right? You've carried off my daughters. There's no talk about his wives that were clearly given to Jacob, witnessed by the relatives, and they were married. And they had been married for years at this point. No, Laban saw it a certain way. You deceived me, and you carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why? Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so that I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of timbrels and harps? Right? Well, that right there, I believe, is a load of hogwash. It's not right. He's going to send Jacob off after he tried to corral him and to keep him, and then now pursue him with a certain intent that God had to intervene and give him a dream at night, or come to him at night and tell him to be careful. I'm watching. Be careful what you say to him, neither good nor bad. So, and then Laban is building up this justifying measure to justify his actions and to justify the way he is and the way he has been. And we will see that as we read on here. You have done a foolish thing, in verse 28. Verse 29, I have the power to harm you. Right? But last night, the God of your father, not my God, the God of your father said to me and warned me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods? Right? And we read earlier that Rachel had waited until her father had gone out to tend to the flocks, and then she snuck into his home and stole his household gods. Why would she do that? Is Rachel just a thief? She was under the benefit of the wealth that had extended to Jacob. Why would she go in and steal her father's household gods? Don't forget earlier, here's the woman who said along with her sister, she said along with her sister, when Jacob was planning to leave, and he went to both wives, Rachel and Leah, and in chapter 31, verse 14, we read, and read last week, then Rachel and Leah replied to Jacob, who said, hey, I think we need to take off. His attitude's changed against us. Do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Okay, that's a strange question. They're his daughters. Here's the answer. Does he not regard us as foreigners? So there was a hateful situation between those two girls, both of them, and their father. Does he not regard us as foreigners? That's how the girls felt. Why'd they feel that way? We'll read on. Not only has he sold us, so he only ever looked at us as a commodity to be bartered with. And we will read, the ins and outs and the intricate portions of the story, and we'll see exactly what happened here. But I'm doing this for a purpose. I'm doing this to illustrate something. Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. So this is escalating in their talk. He regards us as foreigners. He sold us and only looked at us as a commodity to be bartered and sold, rather than his own flesh and blood. And then he's even used up what was paid for us. Wow. This is both of them talking like this. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you. Wow. So here you have Laban, who by divination, we read earlier, learned that Jacob, because of Jacob, he was being blessed. Okay? So then he found a way to be deceitful with Jacob and to try to keep him there. Why? Because he liked the guy? No, because he benefited from him. He was a user. And he was duplicitous and deceitful and a backstabber. That's what kind of nature he decided to employ. This is what kind of course and path he decided to allow his heart to travel. That's what he decided, that's what he became. So that's who he was. So there was a very contentious situation between his two daughters, as we could see in what they said. Wow. We can learn a lot from these different situations, and I'll show you as we read on through here. Do we still have any share in the inheritance of our Father? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Has he not sold us? Yeah. But the two women also, even though their father had foreign gods in the house and practiced divination, they also now were talking about God, as if they were followers of God. And they said, surely all the wealth that God, so they had a recognition, they had an understanding now in their mind, even though they were raised in this house by this man who had these beliefs. Surely all the wealth, in verse 16, that God took away from our father belongs to us. So it tells you their understanding. And to our children. So do whatever God has told you. This is his opinion from both his wives unanimity, absolutely. So both Leah and Rachel had strong reasons to be angry and bitter towards their father. But why did she go in and steal her father's household gods? She didn't believe in him. That was clear. I believe, and you could see, that it was her being vindictive. And usually when someone had gods, they usually were made of silver or gold or some precious stones, or they were valuable. They had a value. And you can see that right through history. Any of these different Buddha statues and all this other stuff, a lot of them had a lot of value and were made from precious and sought after materials. But Rachel and Jacob, they wanted to be married, a married pair, a couple. And they were in love. And they wanted to be together. Jacob, I believe, wanted to be with her, and then when Laban found out that he would get 7 years of service for her, he deceived him. And he wound up giving him someone he never wanted, Leah. Now all of us have a spouse. Could you imagine going through the courtship that you do when you meet your spouse, and you're excited and you're going to be marrying them and you're going to be spending your life with them now, and all of a sudden now it's someone you don't want? It's the man you don't want or the woman you don't want has been injected between you and your love. And this is what happened here. Rachel and Jacob wanted to be a couple, and Leah was thrust into the middle. They were never alone, just him and her ever together alone, because Leah was now, her sister was now one of his wives. Could you imagine that? Think about it. This is the problem, is we read these words and these people and their situations and the nature that abounds in these stories, in these factual accounts. They don't resonate in the way that they should to help us navigate our own lives. And that's why they're there. They're not just there to give us some boring historical account. They're there to give us an account, yes, of one who walked with God and of one who God put his own name right beside. But the stories, with all of its intricacies, are there to give us an account of the nature. And we need to place ourselves there. Anyway, let's read on. I have the power to harm you in verse 29. And then Laban said, but last night God intervened. He said to me this. And then Laban builds his story, his point of view, his perspective. And of course it's completely righteous. You screwed me over, you were deceitful to me, you took that which belonged to me, my daughters. You'll see that. We haven't finished reading yet what Laban said. My daughters. Like the spoils of war. Think about it. The perspective. The spoils of war rather than your wives. He's warped. And you can see that in people today. They only see it their way. They won't see it any other way. And just, if you would have just told me that you're leaving, hey, Laban, I'm out of here. Okay, and then I'm going to have a big party for you. Well, when you read what Laban did and you read the whole narrative here, that's the furthest thing from the truth. And yet this is what's coming out of the guy's mouth. This is his perspective. I'm righteous. I don't want to harm anybody. I'm a good guy. We're so good that God had to intervene and warn him. Don't do what you're going to do. Be careful. Jacob answered Laban. Laban in verse 30 says, now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household, but why did you steal my gods? So now Laban has built his case, he's built his story, and he's hit him with the final point that's supposed to be the big one. Drop the bomb, as they say. Jacob answered Laban, I was afraid, because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. So this explains Jacob's perspective of Laban. He's a bully. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live. That tells you Jacob's character about stealing. Keep that in your mind when we read forward here now. He's saying they won't live. Anyone in his party that has been found to have stolen from Laban will not live. And Jacob will follow up with his words. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live. And Jacob here says, in the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me. And if so, take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. So Rachel was sneaky about it. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and then into the tent of the two female servants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. So they all had their own tents. It tells you about who slept where and how the structure was. Now Rachel had taken the household gods, and she had put them, which tells you her nature, inside her camel's saddle. Saddle. And she was sitting on them. Because she knew, oh boy, my old man's coming. I'm going to make sure that I keep them here. She was not comfortable. She didn't just have them displayed around her tent. She didn't tell Jacob about them. She was very secretive. And she was so worried and knew the potential reaction from her father. She was sitting on these things. They were right where she could see them at all times. Laban searched through everything in the tent but found nothing after he had gone into Rachel's. Rachel said to her father, don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period. So he searched, but he could not find the household gods. So she was pretty deceitful. And she was vengeful. Jacob was angry, and he took Laban to task. What is my crime? He asked Laban. How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? So that's how Jacob saw it. That Laban was hunting him down like he would an enemy. And he was armed with a party that were going to do some harm here. Now that you have searched through all of my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here in front of your relatives and mine, and let them judge between the two of us. So there was two parties here. And now we get into some meat and potatoes here in this story. I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. And Laban wouldn't have known anything about it. And I'm sure there was times when Jacob was hungry. He went without. I did not bring you animals torn by wild beasts. And basically, if there was any, I bore the loss myself. You had no losses. And you demanded payment from me for whatever was stolen by day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime, and the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. Think about this. Why is this here? Is it just a fanciful story? Or are we supposed to take something from this simple story? It was like this for 20 years. How old were you 20 years ago? What's 20 years of your life to you? Yeah. I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks. And you changed my wages 10 times. Now, Jacob here, if you'll notice, does not say, I worked for you for 7 years for that woman right over there, Rachel. And you gave me her. And I had to work another 7 years to get the one I wanted. You used my love against me. You used it. He never said that. He never separated the two. He actually joined the two together and said, I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks. And the 7 years, Jacob set the terms. Not Laban. You can see it right here. Now Laban had 2 daughters in chapter 29 at verse 16. The name of the older was Leah, the younger was Rachel. 17. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful, so she had it way over her sister. Jacob was in love with Rachel, and he said, I'll work for you for 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. So he made the terms, and he made who it was for. Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than some other guy. Stay here with me. So Jacob served him 7 years to get Rachel. But, and this is important, but they seemed like only a few days to him because he loved her, because of his love for her. Well, what kind of love is that? What kind of man is that? They just seemed like a few days. 7 years? How old were you 7 years ago? How much is 7 years to you? And here, and this is where we're bringing ourselves into it. This is just the beginning of being able to see through the cracks. Being able to see through the gap. I expect most of the time for my words to fall on deaf ears because that's just the way it is. And I accept that. But if my word is inspired and the teaching's inspired, well then we need to look through the gaps into this nature. And we can learn from it because it gives us an overview of who we are and the consequences for our decisions and who we are in the big picture. Does your life mean anything? What's the purpose of it? Just for you to live and breathe? Or do you want it to have purpose? Do you want it to go somewhere? Jacob set the terms. The first 7 years were like nothing. What kind of love was that? Let's peer through the gaps now. Let's take a look together. I've been with you for 20 years. You had no losses. And if you had any losses, you demanded payment from me. I stayed up day and night till sleep fled away from my eyes. I worked myself to the bone for you. And then he says here in verse 42, and right after he says that you changed my wages 10 times. I mean, that says it all right there. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would have surely sent me away empty-handed. Never mind your cymbals and your horns playing and your celebrations. You would have kicked me out of there. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands. There you go. We're peering through the gaps now. That's the way you need to be. And last night he rebuked you. Laban answered Jacob, the women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. Pardon me? Now he's rendering and standing on a cultural right. I'm the father-in-law. Those women are my daughters. Those flocks are my flocks. Yeah. Don't forget, he's saying this in front of witnesses. There's more than just the two of them standing there. There's two parties facing off, one against another. This is the condition that's happening. That's why Jacob said, put in front of my relatives, yours and mine, what I took from you, so that they can witness. Nothing? That's right. And then Jacob went and said what he had to say to Laban. Finally, he had never said this before. 20 years. He had never confronted the man, and he had never spoke disrespectfully to him. And he had never expressed, to my knowledge, right? Otherwise, it would be like a broken record. Read through the gaps. Laban would have said, I already know how you feel. Yeah. He didn't. Jacob finally, after 20 years, said his piece. You can see now Laban's mindset. The women are my daughters. No. Jacob worked for them. And even the daughters understood that. We just read how they looked at it. That they were just a commodity. They were meant to be bartered with. That's how they saw it, both of them. We just read it. Those are my daughters. No, they're not. They're his wives. You gave them to him. And not only that, the way in which you gave them to him was to be advantageous to your own self and to your own wealth. They weren't just your daughters, they were a commodity to be bartered and traded. And the children are my children. No, they're not. No, they're not. And the flocks are my flocks. No, they're not. They were wages given. You suffered no losses. This man, according to the deal that you made and changed 10 times over, these were his wages. But this is what he's saying publicly in front of the relatives. So there was some kind of cultural underwriting to empower this, or he wouldn't say it. But talk about a warped sense of view. All you see is mine. Wow. Talking about a megalomaniac. All you see is mine. And yet, what can I do about these daughters of mine? Or about the children that they have borne? Wow. Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us. The story is a factual account of our forefathers' life. It is a snapshot of their lives. And is it only here for a record, or is it an overview, like I said, to the same patterns of human nature and the stressors that come along with life and the physical situations that mold our character? God was watching then, and God is watching now. Rachel and Jacob, they wanted to be together. Leah was inserted into it. Laban looked at his daughters as a commodity, and Laban would not let Jacob go. Jacob did not remind Laban when he was talking here. He did not remind him how he deceived him over Leah. He didn't throw that in his face. We see a picture of how miserable it had been for Jacob, at least for 13 of those years. Because, like we read in Genesis 29 and verse 20, the first 7 years seemed like nothing because he was serving it for Rachel. They seemed like no big deal. And now Laban is saying that everything's mine. That's what he said. All you see is mine. So now Laban, I guess as a result of being warned by God to take it easy, be careful. Come now and let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us. Now here we can see, once Laban says this, all of what he said about this is mine and the daughters are mine and the children are mine. We can see that Jacob was correct in asserting that he would have been sent away empty-handed. He was right. And now we know why God intervened on Jacob's behalf, because we could see how Jacob suffered. And you need to wonder about something here when Jacob describes his suffering. Why? Why? What did Jacob do? Well, he stole his brother's birthright. He waited or took advantage of a situation where his brother was desperate, and he swindled it from him. That's my view on it. That was Esau's view on it. And I'm sure that was Isaac's view on it after his own son lied to him and deceived him and stole away his right. And his own wife stabbed him in the back and took his right away as the man. And you could see culturally how it was stacked in this day. And took his right as the husband, as the father, as the man of the house to give the birthright to whomever he chose. But he was still talking to her. He didn't divorce her. He didn't kick her out. And he was deceived on a very personal and intimate level. That birthright promise that was given to him by his father Abraham, that he had a right to pass on to whomever he would choose, was taken from him by his wife and younger son. That's how we were looking through the cracks. We're looking through the gap. What are we learning? And yet Isaac didn't kick her out, because there was more to the story after this all went down. He even responded to her out of love. And she said, I'm just going to die if I have to stay any longer with these two women that are, my oldest son married Esau. I just can't stand it. And if Jacob does the same, I've got no reason to live. Meanwhile, she knows that Esau has got it in his heart to kill Jacob as soon as the old man passes away. As soon as Isaac's gone, I'm going to kill him for doing what he did to me. Are we going to judge whether he's right or wrong at that point? Well, we do know one thing when we peer through the gap, when we look through the cracks, is that the mother took him very seriously, and she knew her boys, and she said, he needs to get out of here. So she manufactured it. She exploited the situation. And she brought this to Isaac's attention. And he said, oh, okay, yeah, you're right, yeah. I'm grieved too by it. Yeah, that is a concern, you're correct. And then he told Jacob to go. Did he know the kind of family that he was sending him back to? Did he have any idea what Rebekah's brother was like? I think so. But either way, the question was, why did Jacob go through this? Why did he suffer that? Was it because what he sowed is what he reaped? Why did God allow this to happen? This was horrible. He had no sleep. He was awake day and night. For 20 years, he worked like a slave. How did he respond when he was pushed to the wall? When someone was grinding on him and interfering with his life, pretending that the daughters that were given as wages for his work, that he married properly in front of witnesses that were now his wives, were still a commodity for their father to be bartered with. And Jacob said, "You would have sent me away with nothing, empty-handed." How did Jacob respond to a man who had no morals and who was absolutely a backstabber and a user par excellence and a deceiver, to the point where even his own daughters were just something to be traded and bartered with? Even his own daughter said, "Does he not look at us as foreigners, as garbage?" There's a lot we could see here. And there's a lot that allows us to know how God judges, what he allows to happen, and how we should react. What did Christ say to those that believed on him when he challenged them? He said, if you be Abraham's seed, then you would do the things Abraham did. You would feel the way he felt. You would be like him. Well, Jacob came from Abraham. God put his name beside those three of those men. I am the God of Abraham. I am the God of Isaac. And I am the God of Jacob. Well, this God allowed Jacob to go through 20 years of hell. And Jacob, you could tell, was a good man. Because he did not sin in any way. And he even said, if anyone is guilty of stealing anything out of your household, they won't live this day. They're dead. That's how he felt about it. And he told Laban right to his face, you did not have any losses, and I didn't eat anything that wasn't mine out in the field where you wouldn't see. Well, who would have seen if he did the wrong thing? Who would have seen if he touched anything that wasn't his or acted in a deceitful manner on any level? God Almighty. God Almighty. And sometimes in our lives, years go by, and the situation tests us. Things come against us from all sides. How are you reacting? How's your tolerance? What decisions are you making? Who's watching? So Jacob took a stone in verse 45, and he set it up as a pillar. And he said to his relatives, gather some stones. So all of them were physically taking part in this as a symbol. So they took stones and they piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, and Jacob called it Galid. Laban said, this heap, it's a witness between you and me today, and that is why it was called Galid. It was also called Mitzpah, because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take any wives besides my daughters, what a controlling guy. If you take any wives besides my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me. And here's a guy that practiced divination. Here's a guy that had household gods. Sounds to me like Laban learned something out of this whole process as well. He let him go. And I'll tell you something else. Laban obviously had an understanding about the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac, and now the God of Jacob. How did he become his God? Well, he became his God through obedience. He became his God because even in suffering, he still obeyed. And it refined his character. And it weighed his decision making. And it brought his heart forward, I believe. is two paths. The Bible indicates that there are two masters that you may serve. So there is a choice between the two. And I believe that there are those who follow one course and those who follow another. And when they become adults and when they live their life and they come to the apex or the point in their life where their point of no return, their life is what their life is by what they had already lived up until that point, then it is a witness either for or against them. And this is the wonder of the redeeming qualities that come with the death of Christ, is that we can find ourselves having led one foot after the other in a carnal way, down a path that was wrong, with wicked hearts, that when tested to do the right thing, continually failed. But once we have become aware of this, we chose. We chose. Our wretched, disgusting selves are no better and have no right to point our fingers up upon or anybody like that. But now, this redeeming quality of our God, He's become our God, and we've become His, because we're taking advantage over His spilled blood, and we're saying, accept His sacrifice, and I will change with your help. That's the beauty of it, is that now He's redeemed us to our God, to our Creator. And there is redemption waiting for us. And all we have to do is reach out for it. And we could have been the worst kind of creep. We could have been the worst kind of person. Or we could have been a good person. Doesn't matter. Whatever you bring to the table at that point, for good or for bad, is a testimony to you, and it abides with you and grows stronger with you if it is good, and it is wiped out and completely taken away from you if you are and were bad and made the wrong decisions. But now we have to show the character. And that character is going to be tested by our God. Because if we're truly called, well, then He's mindful of us. And just as much as He's watching one who we consider to be a patriarch and a man of God and a man by whom God puts His own name beside, just as much as we read and we marvel at these men, we're in the same position, both men and women. We're being washed by our God on a daily basis. Laban also said to Jacob, "Here is this heap, and here is this pillar. I have set up between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not go past this heap to your side to harm you, and that you will not go past this heap and pillar to my side to harm me. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us." So Jacob took an oath. In the name of the fear of his father Isaac. Look at the respect. Even though he wasn't Isaac's favorite. He offered a sacrifice there in the hill country, and he invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. And early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters, and he blessed them. And then he left and returned home. So this all turned out well. And he blessed his daughters. And he did the right thing. And I believe Laban learned something from this whole encounter. You had no response from Laban after Jacob had said what his piece. He wasn't saying, "No, Jacob, I only changed your wages 8 times. Not 10. There was no argument here. Jacob told the truth. And Laban stopped his point of view, part of it anyway, and allowed Jacob to go. And not only go, he initiated a covenant. He knew what had to be done at this point, that a barrier would be built, and that Jacob would not cross that barrier to harm him, nor Laban to harm Jacob. He had a change of heart, clearly. And he blessed his daughters and he kissed his grandchildren like he should have. And he left. in chapter 32, we get to see more of a window into the character of the different parties that are playing and working their way through the narrative. And this is important because you are living your life. You are having your experience. And there is a narrative that's being written about that experience, especially if you're called. You are front and center. And our lives and our decisions and our hearts are being witnessed by millions of beings. If Christ spilled his blood and he called you, and you said, I accept, and you're baptized, do you not think that not only is there a witness against you and that we're being judged now, but that he's mindful of you? Why would he even call you and give you his Spirit to begin with if he wasn't watching you every day? And we know the scripture that says God Almighty knows the hairs on your head. And we know the scripture that says, my ways are not your ways. My ways are higher than your ways, as the skies are above the earth, as the heavens are above the earth. And like my brother said, it reminded me, we know the scripture that says the birds of the air don't sow and they don't reap, and yet they eat. The flowers of the field are dressed in a beautiful array. How much more important are we than birds in the air or flowers of the field? He's watching. He's watching. He's attentive. And when we put this in our mind, and we put it before our decision making, we keep it in the front of our minds, this helps our decisions. We have witness of what happens to those that struggle, and that God saves them out of the situations that they go into. 20 years. 20 years. And he worked day and night, and he worked to his hands to the bone. In chapter 32, Jacob also went on his way after this. And the angels of God met him. Wow, what do you know? And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is the camp of God. So he named that place Mahanaim. Mahanaim. I'm glad Jacob named it that because I'm having a hard time saying it. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he instructed his messengers, this is what you are to say to my lord Esau. This is how he addressed his older brother. What a character. Your servant Jacob, so he was humble, says, I have been staying with Laban, and I have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. And now I am sending this message to my Lord, again, that I may find favor in your eyes. When the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, we went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you with 400 men who are with him. Wow. In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, and the flocks and herds and camels as well. Now he thought to himself, so he's a strategist. We've seen that before, when he's putting the reeds and different kind of things into the watering hole for the animals. He thought to himself, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left, it just may escape. He won't have time. He won't have the chance to get two groups. Then Jacob prayed. So in the event of overwhelming odds in your life, if you want to emulate your forefather, you'll pray. Then Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. So he's reminding of God's promises. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness that you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two camps. I had only my staff, and you see the heart of a man whose only claim was to the wooden staff that he held in his hand, and nothing else, knowing that everything that he had, even in wealth or in poverty, with only a staff, came from God. He didn't claim anything for himself. Do you see something familiar here in Abraham? You see something familiar here in Isaac? You see something familiar here in Job? Naked I've come from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return to the earth. Do you see something familiar here with Moses? I can't speak. Who am I to talk? I can't put two words together. You know I have a problem. I am unworthy. He knew, and it was a mindset. And that mindset was preserved because of his connection to God. And when we leave that connection with our Creator, our minds are up for grabs. We're finished. You can see that with Solomon. We need to stay connected to the author and the one who brings peace, the peace giver, to that mind and to that spirit. I'm unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness that you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid that he will come and attack me, and also the mothers of their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and I will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. So he's saying, and he's thinking already, even if my life is taken, those kids have got to survive because you promised. Wow, what a man. He spent the night there in verse 13, and from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau. 200 female goats. This was just a gift. And 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. That's huge. This is just a portion. This is just a gift of what he has to give. Wow. He put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and he said to his servants, go ahead of me and keep some space between the herds. So he wanted them to be delivered in phases so that it would have an effect. This guy's a strategist. But he's a strategist that doesn't provide that strategy or lend that strategy to his own confidence. He still has complete trust in God. He knows the score. I only came into this land with my staff. That's all I own. Everything else you've given to me. I know who owns it. So he instructed the one in the lead. When my brother Esau meets you and asks, who do you belong to? And where are you going? And who owns all of these animals in front of you? So he knows the gift's impressive. Then you are to say to him, they belong to your servant Jacob, and they are a gift sent to my lord Esau. And he is coming behind us, Esau. He also instructed the second party with these animals, and the third, and all the others who followed, the herds. You are to say the same thing to Esau when you meet him. And be sure to say, your servant Jacob is coming behind us, for he thought, I will pacify him with these gifts that I am sending on ahead, and later when I see him, perhaps he will receive me. So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. So now Jacob prayed to God. Jacob called upon God's promises and reminded him that his descendants would be like the sand on the seashore. And he also, though, strategized. He did both. He knew ultimately it would be up to God, but he also strategized to find favor and to soften the blow of what he did with his brother Esau. You could clearly see, while we're reading through here in closing, you could clearly see the distinct paths, what these different people walked, and what led them. And then you could clearly see as we will, and as we get through this story together, what Christ meant when he said in Matthew 6, verse 24. You don't have to turn there. Because like I said a few weeks back, Jesus Christ read these same scriptures that we're reading today. In Matthew 6, verse 24, our Lord said, "No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted is the key word, to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve, in this case, both God and money." And money created this false perception of security and self-empowerment. But it was the very same thing that Job refuted. And now we just read that Jacob refuted. I only had my staff when I came in here. All of what you have given, all of what I have has been given to me. In other words, they looked at it that it was borrowed to them. It had been given to them. It was nothing that they deserved. And it was nothing that was going to get between them and their God. In this case, Christ was talking about the love of money. And in closing here in Luke 16, sometimes you have to read different scriptures that talk about the same thing. And it broadens your perspective. It gives you more understanding of what was truly meant. Like an old teacher said years ago, the Bible interprets itself. It doesn't need some guy to come along and interpret it. The Holy Spirit's the only thing that can interpret it. Chapter 16, verse 13. In closing, again it says, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other." Again, Christ said, you cannot serve both God and money. And a little forward here in 14, just to give a perspective, the Pharisees, who loved money, wow, think of what Christ was telling them. The Pharisees who loved money heard all of this and were sneering at Jesus. You see, the other party that serves the other master, the other spirit. Yeah. You are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, Pharisees, carnal people. But God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. So that tells you where God stands. And if you're with God, and you allow God that effect in your life, and you build that connection with Him, then you're going to have the same value system that He has. There are things that He detests, and there are things that He takes joy in. We can look through the gap. We can see through the cracks together. We could see God's reaction. We could see, or even those that were highly blessed by Him, how much they suffered. Thank you.